What up, students? Today we are working on the galaxy painting. Guys, the galaxy painting is one of my favorites because it's really when you get to learn how to blend and control paint. First off, what you're going to do is you're going to start off by choosing a silhouette. Now, a silhouette is when a shadow of an object is shown because the light is behind that object. It's kind of like when you get a picture taken of yourself or your family with the sunset behind you. And if the sun's right behind you, you show up dark and all you can see is your outline. That's because the light's behind you, you show up as a shadow. So on a rough draft piece of paper, you're gonna draw your silhouette. You do not need to show any details on the inside, again, because all you're showing is just that outline of the object that you choose to do. And then from there, then you paint your sky. After that, then what we're gonna do is we're gonna transfer a silhouette on top of our sky painting, and then we're gonna paint in the silhouette all black. Here we go. So starting off with this rough draft piece of paper, which is going to be the size of our final poster. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start off by having some pine trees come up from the bottom, and then having a pine tree limb coming across the middle, and then an eagle sitting on top of that limb. So guys, here I have, again, my pine trees down here. I've got my limb, I've got my eagle nice and big, which is where when I paint, I'm gonna make sure that it's lightest here, so really my eagle shows up nice and defined. And I've got another branch up here that I wanted to poke through at the top. So again, this drawing, it's not that important to have a ton of detail. You don't need really any detail at all in here. You saw kind of me have my shoulders in there. The only reason why I did that was so that way I got the head positioned correctly on top of the eagle's body. And then I erased it because I was just sketching. The trees down here, I've just got them in there for reference for when I do paint. Basically what they're gonna look like is this. If I want to put them in like this, I could do that. But you'll see in a second on how I'm actually going to paint those trees. But really what's important is I want you to pay attention to this part. Guys, now on to painting. Now I want to make sure that you understand what I'm looking for when you're painting. I'm looking for nice, smooth, blended transition from dark to light. We're gonna start off by doing layers of our lighter areas and then slowly applying our darker areas and making sure every time we apply a new darker area that we're bringing it in nice and slow and even to our lighter areas. Here are some examples of what we don't want it to look like versus what we do want it to look like.
All right, let's take a look at these 4 options. Options 1, 2, 3, and 4. My question is, out of these 4, which one is done correctly? If we take a look at option number 1, we see value change from the outside in, but not gradual value change. Doesn't look very spacey. It looks a little more wormhole-ish. If we take a look at number 2, we see directional gradual value change, and you see the direction of the brush strokes. Kind of looks like we're in Star Wars mode. If we take a look at number 3, we can see nice gradual value change towards the center, kind of cloudish. If we take a look at number 4, then number 4 is gradual value change from the corners working in, but it's each individual corner working in rather than working around as a circle. So out of the 4, number 3 is definitely by far the best looking one. That is the one that I want us all trying to achieve.
All right, guys, so here I have my poster board that I'm going to be painting on. I've got my supplies. As of right now, I've got some paper towel. I've got a 1-inch paintbrush because I want it nice and big. Since I'm working on a big surface and I want my space to be loosey-goosey, I'm going to make sure that I've got a paintbrush that's going to cover. I've got acrylic paint for this project. Right now I've got blue and green. I'm going to go for a cool color scheme on this. I'm going to start off with a layer of green over my entire poster board. Then I'm going to go back in with some blue and maybe even go back in with some purple. I kind of want to give that Aurora Borealis feel, or in other words, Northern Lights. The Northern Lights kind of do a swirl. I'm not going to worry so much about a swirl. I'm going to do more of like a glow effect. The other thing that you're going to need is I've got a bucket of water here. That way I can really have control on the transparency of the paint. So again, we're going to be working in layers. I'm going to place down a layer of green, let that dry, and then place down a layer of blue. All right, now you could really see that I was just kind of like slopping on the paint, and I really don't have any system of how my brush stroke is. Like, I'm not going from side to side, keeping it nice and neat. This is a space galaxy painting, and we really want it to almost look like it's cloudy of colors, okay? So basically what I'm doing is I'm almost kind of doing big star-like strokes. Kind of over to the side. I'm not staying even. It's kind of spontaneous, okay? Also, every time you saw me kind of turn around, it was me dipping a little bit into the water, get my paintbrush a little wet, and then scooping up some paint, okay? Once in a while, I dab my paintbrush into the paper towel if I thought it might be too wet. I'm trying to really control the consistency of water versus paint in my paintbrush. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this dry, and I'm probably going to do another layer of green, okay? I'm probably going to stay away from where I think my eagle's going to be because I really want that to be lightest, but I do want these areas, the corners, to be a lot darker. So I could go straight with the blue to start getting it darker, but I think I'm going to want another layer of green. Because right now the white of the poster board is kind of showing through, which is dulling down that green. So in order to get it naturally darker, if you put another layer on, it's going to look a little darker. So in my second layer, again, start in the corners and pull it in till it blends through. Here we go. All right, so now you can see how the center is starting to look like it's glowing. It's darker on the outsides, and there's a nice blend from the corners to the middle. The way that I do this is by starting off in a corner, and then I start working down the edges and then work towards the middle. Okay, the one thing that you don't want is you don't want a curved area. You want it to almost work towards the center, almost in a circular area. So I start by heavy paint in the corners, and then from that heavy paint, I use that heavy paint then to gradually push that paint towards the center. Less and less paint is in my brush, and it just kind of like dispenses through as I lose the paint in my paintbrush. Okay. If I have to go to refill from my paint, I start back up in the corner and continue to push down to where I'm losing paint out of my paintbrush, and that's what causes it to blend. Now that I'm done with green, time to move on to blue. All right, now I'm gonna add on blue, and again, I'm gonna work in the corner, work from the sides, and then slowly bring it into the middle as the blue leaves the paintbrush. That is how I'm blending from one to the other. Looks like this. Now moving on to purple. All right, now that I finished my purple didn't do a lot. It just added a little bit more of a variation and gave me the opportunity to blend just a little bit more. Now it's dry, so I'm gonna go back in with my black. Now, the thing that you need to remember about black is that a little bit goes a long ways. A lot of times I get a lot of students that are here, it looks really, really good, looks really great, and then they put the black on. And it gets really carried away. So it's best to start off little and slowly develop. So I've got just a tiny little bit of black, and it's on there. All right, again, now I've got to let this fully dry, and my next step will then be placing in my stars. Then after that, then place in my silhouette. All right, now it's time to start off with the stars of the galaxy. I've got my white paint here, and some of you might be thinking, ooh, Mr. Josh, I could do like, a little bit of splatter paint with, a toothbrush or a paintbrush. You could do that. I'm going to teach you a different method because not everybody has a toothbrush to where it can go to waste, and also maybe you don't have the space or the room to be able to do some splatter paint. So I'm going to teach you this method. Another method that you just have in the back pocket, and you can use it when needed. So what I do is I have a piece of paper towel, and I make sure that I crumple it up pretty good, because this right here, this rough area, is what I'm going to use to then texturize the stars in there. So what I do is I dab the paper towel in the white paint. It's really globby, so I'm not going to put this on there. I'm going to dip it a little bit so therefore that glob gets out of there. And then on a practice piece of paper over here, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of work it out a little bit because I don't want a lot in there. And I don't want to have to push very hard. All I want to have to do is just kind of barely get it in. Okay? So, you don't want to push too hard. and you don't want the same pattern over and over again. So every time after I put some stars down, I need to lift up, twist, and then put it down again. So it looks something kind of like this. What this does is this gives a big variation of stars. I've got some bigger stars, brighter stars, lighter stars. The lighter stars are obviously back in the background. The brighter stars are more forward. I'm going to go ahead and refill. When I refill, I'm going to go ahead, dab some of it out, practice a little bit before I go back onto my painting. I'm really happy with how this looks. I'm gonna stop. I don't wanna do it too much. And now it's time to let this dry and then add in the silhouette. All right, now I've got my galaxy painting and I've got my drawing, my silhouette drawing. Now what I'm gonna do is transfer it on top, so therefore you'll be able to see my drawing on here without having to take the chance of making mistakes on here while drawing with pencil on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece of charcoal and I'm going to draw over my lines. Now I'm going to place this down. I don't want to move it too much after I put it down because I don't want the charcoal to get all over my painting. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to push really hard with my pencil. What happens ends up showing through. Now what I'm going to do is take some black paint and a paintbrush and just start painting inside my lines. So therefore it appears as a silhouette. Now for the black, I've got my black paint and I have different sizes of paintbrushes. The reason being is because there's some areas that I'm going to want to fill, like the middle of the eagle. I'm going to want to fill in with a bigger paintbrush so it doesn't take me all day. There are areas like the branches where I'm going to want to be very, very careful and have a small paintbrush. And then I've got this bigger paintbrush. It is a 1-inch paintbrush, and I am going to do my pine trees with this paintbrush. With my pine trees, all I did was a line, and I'm going to show you why. I'm going to show you how to do pine trees the Bob Ross way. So, when you do a pine tree the Bob Ross way, what I do is I get my paintbrush just semi-wet, a little damp, and then I take off the excess water, so therefore the bristles are nice and damp. And then I pick up a little bit of black paint. Load the paintbrush with some black paint. And then this pine tree here goes up all the way up here. So I'm gonna tilt my paintbrush up like this. I'm gonna use the skinny part of the paintbrush, and then I'm gonna work right on down. And as I get down to the bottom of the tree, I'm pushing down on the paintbrush, so therefore it gets thicker. Again. Nice and light, and as I get lower and lower, I'm pushing on the paintbrush, so therefore it gets thicker as it gets lower on the tree trunk. I want this to be just a little thinner, so I'm gonna go ahead and just lightly lift up at the top of that. Now, what I'm gonna do is to get the bristles. I'm loading my paintbrush with paint. I'm gonna turn it like this to where I'm pushing down on this edge right here. And then as I work away, I'm pushing and pushing more. You kind of work at a zigzag, side to side. Now you don't want the zigzag to really show through that bad, not that much. And all you do is just push down more and more. Aggressively push down. I'm gonna reload because I'm starting to run out of paint. Start in the middle and then keep doing what I was doing. Push and get that tree to get wider and wider and wider. Now you might be thinking, Mr. Rush, I don't want to do pine trees. That's totally okay. You don't have to do pine trees. But some people like to do pine trees, especially if they have like an object that's in the air floating and they want something on the bottom. These pine trees are really easy to do, and at the end they look really cool. So again, load the paintbrush, start at the top, just barely touching, and then start going side to side. And as you work down, you push harder and harder and harder. All right, now that I'm done with my trees, now it's time to do the rest. Guys, this really consists of only just craftsmanship, making sure that you're very, very careful, staying inside the lines, and being as neat as possible. Little word of advice would be, go ahead, do your outside border first, and then fill in the rest. That's one way of keeping it nice and neat. So here we go.